Lena had never been a particularly lucky person, nor one of profound confidence. She was, however, unreasonably skilled at convincing other people to believe in luck, confidence, and the idea that the universe held special, personal plans just for them. Perhaps this was why, as a semi-disillusioned astrologer, she found herself working in the back of a dusty bookstore, arranging long-forgotten tarot decks and astrology guides while occasionally reading horoscopes for the curious locals. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Or at least it was until she stumbled upon something decidedly strange. It happened on a Tuesday, which was an absurd day for anything life-changing to occur. Lena had been muttering under her breath, mostly about her aching back and how she didn't sign up for heavy lifting when she took the job. But as she tugged an old book from the bottom shelf, she felt a sudden pulse, like a heartbeat, thrum through her fingertips. "Good Lord, what was that?" she whispered, clutching the book. It looked ancient, leather-bound, with fading gold lettering spelling out "Celestial Guide." The edges were frayed, and the cover was marked by countless fingerprints, as if the book had passed through many hands. With an eyebrow raised, Lena opened it. The pages were filled with intricate star charts, but unlike any she had seen before. These weren't constellations in the night sky, each star had a name written beneath it, and they glimmered faintly, as though alive. "This is weird," she muttered, flipping through the pages with growing curiosity. As she did, the pulsing grew stronger until it seemed to seep into her chest, filling her with an odd, comforting warmth. Then, quite suddenly, the light enveloped her, and she vanished from the bookstore entirely. When the blinding light faded, she was no longer standing among dusty shelves and the faint smell of coffee. Instead, she was in an expansive, surreal space filled with stars hanging around her like low-hanging fruit. She blinked, disoriented. "Oh, great. I'm either dead, dreaming, or both," Lena said, hands on her hips. "Or neither," a voice replied from somewhere above her. Startled, she looked up to see a figure hovering beside a particularly bright star. He was tall, with an ethereal glow, wearing what appeared to be a robe made of constellations. His face was young, but his eyes carried an ageless depth, and there was a mischievous glint in them that made Lena immediately suspicious. "Who are you?" she demanded, attempting to sound braver than she felt. The figure grinned. "Orion, at your service. And welcome, Lena, to the celestial star realm. Don't be alarmed. You're here for a very important reason." "Uh-huh," she replied, crossing her arms. "You're a constellation?" Orion shrugged, as if it were a minor detail. "Yes, but that's not the point. The point is, every star here represents a soul, your soul included." "My soul?" she echoed, looking around. Stars of various colors and brightness surrounded her, each one humming with a soft, unique resonance. She felt a strange pull towards them, a comforting sensation like she was among old friends. "Indeed. And you've been summoned here because you've lost your way," Orion continued with a dramatic sweep of his hand, as though explaining something obvious. "Lost my way? I'm an astrologer, I read horoscopes and give love advice." "I didn't think that would require a full-on intervention from the stars," Lena said, rolling her eyes, but Orion only chuckled. "Yes, but along the way, you lost your spark. And the stars have chosen you for a journey to rediscover your essence, your light, your—" he paused, trying to find the right word. "Your thing, Lena." She scoffed. "My thing?" "Yes, your thing. Call it destiny, call it purpose, call it cosmic pizzazz, it doesn't matter. Point is, the stars think you need it back. So, you're here to connect with the souls that have shaped you, each one a piece of who you are and could be." Lena's mouth opened and closed. This sounded ridiculous, but then again, she was standing in a sea of stars with a constellation for a tour guide. She sighed, resigning herself to whatever bizarre cosmic intervention this was. "Fine," she said, throwing her hands up. "Where do we start?" Orion clapped his hands, and the nearest star floated over, pulsating softly. "Excellent. This is the star of regret. An essential starting point." Lena stared at the star, feeling an inexplicable pull towards it. She reached out, and the moment her fingers brushed its light, she was pulled into a vision, a memory from her past. She was 16, sitting in the high school auditorium, too scared to audition for the school musical. It had been her dream to be on stage, but as she'd sat there, fear overtook her, and she'd convinced herself she wasn't good enough. She had missed her chance. As the memory faded, she felt the regret prickling inside her, but then something unexpected happened. A voice echoed from the star, and it was sarcastic, almost mocking. "Look at you, young Lena, scared of a little stage fright. If only you knew how many stages you'd face later. The boyfriends, the job interviews, the public meltdowns." Lena almost laughed. The star wasn't there to make her wallow, it was poking fun at her old regrets, making them seem silly, even funny. She chuckled, feeling lighter as the star's light faded. "See? Not so bad," Orion said, floating beside her with a grin. Lena grinned back, feeling oddly comforted. "All right, that wasn't terrible. What's next?" Orion guided her toward another star, this one glowing a warm, golden hue. "Next up, we have the star of laughter. Get ready for some good, old-fashioned silliness." When she touched it, Lena found herself in another memory. This time, it was a happier one. She was in her 20s, on a road trip with friends, laughing uncontrollably as they sang off-key to pop songs. It was a time when she hadn't cared about how she looked or sounded. She'd simply embraced the joy of the moment. The star's light hummed, and a voice filled her mind, playful and bright. "Hey, Lena, remember when you didn't care about being perfect? You just laughed, lived, and went with the flow. Where'd that part of you go?" She felt a pang of nostalgia but also a surge of warmth. The memory was like a forgotten treasure, reminding her that life didn't have to be so serious all the time. She could laugh at herself, at the world, at anything, really. When the light faded, she found herself wiping away a tear. "All right, point taken," she murmured with a smile, and so her journey continued. Star by star, she connected with pieces of her past, each one adding a layer to her understanding of herself. There was the star of choices, showing her the different paths she could have taken, becoming an artist, traveling the world, settling down in a small town. Each choice was presented with a humorous twist, like glimpses into a series of alternate, absurd realities. One memory involved her becoming an avant-garde artist who only painted with melted ice cream. In another, she was a famous travel blogger who got stranded on a deserted island because she misread the map. Each possibility made her laugh, but they also reminded her of the freedom she had, the endless options she'd turned away from. Orion watched her with a knowing smile, guiding her with an encouraging nudge here and there. "Life's like this, you know," he'd say with a shrug. "We're all just stumbling through, making choices, seeing where they take us. You're not supposed to have it all figured out." After what felt like hours, Lena found herself standing before a particularly formidable star. This one was larger than the others, and its light was fierce, almost blinding. "Who's this?" she asked, squinting. "This," Orion replied, his tone more serious, "is the star of truth. It represents the hardest part of your journey, facing the truths about yourself you may not want to see." Lena hesitated, feeling a prickle of fear. She'd always avoided looking too deeply at her own flaws. But she knew there was no turning back. She reached out, and as her hand met the light, she was plunged into a stark vision of herself. She saw her insecurities, her fears of failure, her constant self-doubt. It was like looking into a mirror, but the reflection showed every flaw she'd ever tried to hide. A voice, her own voice, echoed from the star. "You think you're not enough. You think you'll never be enough. So you settle, and you shrink, and you convince yourself you're fine with it." Lena clenched her fists, wanting to turn away, but the voice continued. "But here's the thing, Lena, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real." The words resonated deep within her, piercing through her self-doubt. She felt a release, as though a weight she'd been carrying her entire life had lifted. As the vision faded, she realized the truth. she didn't have to be anyone but herself, flawed, funny, and imperfect. When she opened her eyes, Orion was watching her, a gentle smile on his face. "You did well," he said softly. For the first time, Lena felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She felt whole. With the star of truth fading in her memory, Lena found herself still surrounded by the endless expanse of shimmering stars, each one a piece of her life she had just reclaimed. She looked around, letting the weight of each experience settle in her chest. A sense of wholeness filled her, a quiet realization that she had been piecing together the puzzle of herself all along, each star a fragment she hadn't known she needed. Orion floated beside her, his usual teasing grin softened. "So," he said, folding his arms. "Feeling enlightened yet?" Lena smirked. "Maybe a little. But let's not get carried away. I'm still trying to figure out why I'm here." Orion's eyes sparkled. "You're here because, at some point, you forgot what it was like to shine. You convinced yourself that you didn't have any real light of your own, so you dimmed yourself, tried to be small. But we called you here to remind you, you're part of this cosmos, Lena. You're meant to glow." She felt his words sink in, filling her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Yet there was a pang of sadness, too. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Now," Orion said, reaching out a hand, "we finished the journey." He led her to a final star, one that was smaller and fainter than the others but pulsing with a steady, determined rhythm. The moment Lena touched it, the star's light seeped into her skin, and she found herself transported to a new vision, one that was startlingly different from the memories she'd seen before. In this vision, she was back in her present life, but everything looked more vivid, more alive. She saw herself returning to the bookstore, her movements purposeful, her smile genuine as she helped customers find books or simply made them laugh. She saw herself giving small astrology workshops, drawing in curious people who had questions about the stars and about themselves. The scene shifted, and she saw herself laughing with friends, throwing herself into life without hesitation or self-doubt. She was no longer just existing, she was living, embracing every imperfect part of herself, and just as quickly as it appeared, the vision faded, leaving her back in the starry realm with Orion by her side. He was watching her carefully. "What did you see?" Lena took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "I saw me. The real me. Not hiding or trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. Just me, living my life with the light I have." Orion smiled, a proud glint in his eyes. "Exactly. That's what this journey was about, Lena. You don't need to be someone you're not, or dim your light to make others comfortable. You just have to be you." She nodded, feeling a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She finally understood why she'd been brought here, why each star had shown her different pieces of her past and possibilities. It wasn't to change who she was but to help her see herself as whole, as complete. Every regret, every laugh, every choice and truth, all of it was part of her light. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at Orion with gratitude. "For guiding me through all this." He shrugged, feigning nonchalance, but Lena could see the warmth in his eyes. "Just doing my job. But remember, Lena, the stars are always here. If you ever feel lost again, look up. We're always watching." With that, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch light but grounding. The stars around them began to blur, their lights swirling together until they formed a glowing tunnel that seemed to lead back to the world she had left behind. Lena closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the stars fill her as she felt herself being drawn back to her own life. There was a rush of movement, and when she opened her eyes, she was standing in the middle of the bookstore again, the old star chart clutched tightly in her hands. The store was quiet, just as she'd left it, with the smell of old books and faint traces of incense lingering in the air. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream, but as she looked down at the star chart, she could still feel the faint, comforting pulse of the stars. She took a deep breath, letting the familiar surroundings settle around her. It was as though she was seeing everything for the first time, and in a way, she was. The walls of the bookstore, once dull and uninspiring, now seemed like a cozy haven. Each book, each corner of the shop, held possibilities she hadn't noticed before. As she moved through the aisles, she caught her reflection in a dusty mirror tucked away on a high shelf. She looked at herself, really looked, and saw a different person staring back. There was a spark in her eyes, a hint of a smile on her lips, as if she were holding a secret that only she understood. She was no longer afraid of being herself, of embracing all the pieces that made her who she was. She had reclaimed her light, and it glowed within her, steady and unwavering. Later that day, she decided to try something new. She put up a small sign in the window, "Astrology workshops every Saturday." She wasn't sure if anyone would come, but it didn't matter. This was her life, her light, and she was going to share it however she could. The following weekend, the first workshop was filled to the brim. People of all ages crowded into the small bookstore, eager to hear her speak. Lena felt a nervous flutter but quickly pushed it aside, letting her joy take over. She spoke with honesty, humor, and warmth, weaving in stories from her journey without giving away the cosmic details. She made the stars relatable, funny, real, just as they had been to her. As the weeks went by, her workshops became a regular event, drawing people who sought guidance, laughter, or just a reminder of the light within themselves. Lena found herself building a community, a family of sorts, with each person who came through her door. One night, after closing up the shop, Lena stepped outside and looked up at the night sky. The stars were scattered across the heavens, shining with a soft, familiar glow. She smiled, a deep, knowing smile, feeling their presence as if they were old friends. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing the stars could hear her. She didn't need a response. She knew they were there, watching, guiding, just as they had always been. As she walked home under the night sky, Lena felt a quiet peace settle over her. She didn't have all the answers, and she still had days where doubt crept in, but she was no longer afraid. She knew, deep down, that she was a part of something vast, something bright, something that would always light her way. And as she took one last look at the stars, she felt their light reflected in her heart, steady and unwavering, guiding her forward, always forward, with her own unique glow. The end.